She pries the lid an inch, and the world tightens. White crystals lace the paper-wrapped sticks like frost. She doesn't blink. "Don't touch the fuses," she whispers to no one, to the wind. Phone in one hand, the other steadying the box so it won't wobble. Sirens are distant, thin threads across the gull's cries. The tide inches forward, patient, heavy. One wrong move means cottages, dogs, children, gone. To understand why she's here, rewind 1 hour. A quiet morning. Her ritual walk, cataloging what the storm unearthed. A glint of rust where there shouldn't be, and a seam weeping yellow-white. She keeps a ledger the way some people keep a diary. Dates, tides, wind direction. A few words about what the beach decided to give back. After a nor'easter, the pages usually thicken. Debris forms stories. A lobster pot wire draped in eelgrass. A length of weathered rope braided into a perfect loop. She doesn't collect everything. She observes, sketches, and leaves most things where they belong. That's the method. Slow attention, careful hands, context before conclusions. The cove sits between two fingers of rock, a quiet pocket locals trust. In summer, kids skip stones at low tide and drag kites so large they shadow the sand. Cottages watch from the bluff, porches and bright towels, the easy chorus of vacation. Off-season, it's her archive. She walks the same line from dune grass to rack line, eyes tuned to what's new within the familiar. This morning, the storm has shifted the dunes like a hand smoothing a bedsheet. She reads the field in layers. Fresh seaweed closer to the water. The heavy stuff, planks, plastic pails, thrown high. And then something interrupts the pattern. Half buried, an edge that isn't drift, isn't natural, too straight, too deliberate. The metal is dull under rust, but it catches a single thread of pale sun. She pauses, breathing in the mineral cold of the aftermath. The stakes live here, close. Those cottages sit within an easy shout. Children race this strand when the tide forgets itself and pulls back. A dog could dig here because a gull decided to tease it. She feels responsibility settle like a weight across her shoulders. What we learn about a place matters because people trust it. She crouches. Out comes the phone for a photo, then a second with her finger for scale. She logs coordinates, notes the time, the wind, the tide falling. To know a find, catch its context before curiosity runs ahead. She presses her palm to the sand. It's cold and compact. The rusted line doesn't move when she tries, not trash tossed by wind. It's anchored. Her hands work gently, fingertips making a small trench around the metal. Sand slides in on itself, so she steadies the walls with shells and a flat shard of driftwood she uses like a trowel. The form grows. A rectangle, corners rounded. Rivets set along the lid in a pattern she's seen in photographs of field crates. Military green once, now a muddle of browns and salt bloom. The box resists, then yields in slow increments, until she can rock it enough to feel its weight. Curiosity sharpens, but training keeps it from cutting. She speaks aloud to steady herself, the way she does when handling brittle paper. Edges first, then the surface. Identify fasteners. Consider fragility. She traces the seam. There's a residue at the joint. Pale yellow trending white, like pollen clinging to wax. She doesn't like it. She photographs that, too. She looks inland. The cove is empty. A gull watches from a post and scolds her for ignoring its kingdom. No other footprints but hers. She listens for the distant thud of a truck or a voice carried by wind. Nothing. The ocean exhales, pulls, returns. She presses 2 fingers against the lid. If this is a simple toolbox, opening it means clearing a hazard before kids arrive on the weekend. If it's not, opening it could be the hazard. She slides her hand to the latches, tests one lightly. It's stiff, then brittle, an old metal snap that gives like the leg of a dry twig. The sound is small but final. She stops, smells the air. There's the tidal salt, the rot of stranded kelp, and something else, faint and wrong, sweet where the sea is never sweet. She lowers the lid without closing it, the way you might set a book down over a candle flame you haven't yet blown out. Storms peel time back. She's written that line in her ledger more than once. Old layers surface, uninvited. Glass marbles, a stamped dog tag, a fragment of painted sign. She thinks of the projects that once ran along this coast. Piers built, piers demolished. Quarries feeding stone to breakwaters. Wartime years when supplies moved in strange routes. The box could be nothing. It could be a memory someone meant to discard, and the tide decided otherwise. She stands, brushes her palms against her jeans, and steps back to see the whole scene. The cove hangs quiet, yet she feels watched by the past. She kneels again, slower. She doesn't touch the seam this time. She studies the residue, the weeping line of yellow-white. One detail will matter later, and she suspects this is it. She adds a final note. Seams weeping. Sweet odor. Delay, decision. For a long breath, she does nothing. The thing is, restraint is its own kind of action. Then, she leans in and lifts the lid a measured inch. Not to claim, but to verify. The world narrows to what's inside. The smell rushes out, sweet and chemical. Paper-wrapped sticks, red-brown and waxed, glinting with white lace where they shouldn't. Frayed cords sleep like snakes across them. She exhales once, slow. Curiosity ends here. Now it's care. She steadies the box with one hand so the tide's push won't jostle it, and makes the call. The smell is wrong first. Sweet like cordite's cousin, but softer. Syrupy, clinging in the nose. It doesn't belong to wind or salt. Her brain names it before she wants it to. Nitroglycerin. She doesn't move. The box rests in a shallow cradle of sand, and the tide's breath nudges the edge of her world every few seconds. She tells herself to breathe from the ribs, not the shoulders. Keep everything small. Keep everything slow. Inside, the paper-wrapped cylinders lie in 2 snug rows. The waxed paper has gone translucent in places, darkened in others, and along the creases, white crystals have etched themselves like frost. The cords, fuses braided with age, fray at the ends, cotton strands lifting as if they'd sigh if touched. The color isn't the theatrical red of old cartoons. It's a somber red-brown, like dried clay. It looks like sleep. It isn't. Stakes line up quickly. Heat, shock, friction. The trifecta you never invite to a beach. Houses on the bluff. A narrow access road that traps sound. A dog's sprint. A child's curious hand. A kite string dragged across metal. She pictures the blast radius and her stomach tightens. The box cannot wobble. The lid cannot drop. The tide cannot lift or shift the sand enough to tilt the contents against the side. Her training slides in like a well-worn card pulled from a file. She remembers a museum tour from childhood, the way a curator lowered his voice at a glass case holding an old blasting cap. Sweating dynamite, he'd said, means it's done holding itself together. She didn't understand the chemistry then. She understands enough now. Nitroglycerin can seep out, crystallize, wait. And any rough kindness, a jolt, a scrape, can wake it violently. She keeps the phone in her right hand and, with her left, flattens the sand just along the box's base, building a thin, steadying shoulder. She doesn't add weight. She doesn't press. She creates everything as if drawing breath on glass. The world narrows to a set of small tasks. Thumb on the phone's unlock. Screen brightness down so she won't flinch at a glare. She opens maps, drops a pin, and labels it with the one phrase that matters. Possible old explosives. Before she calls, she stops herself from looking away. One detail matters later. The white residue beads heavier along the left seam, where a faint dent mars the metal. That dent could have been a shovel strike in some forgotten year. It could be why crystals built like frost there first. She notes it because memory wins over panic when it has anchors. She swallows, tastes the chemical sweetness again. She speaks aloud, low and steady. Don't touch the fuses. Don't move the lid. Don't back away fast. No sudden changes. It's not for the box, it's for her nervous system. She shifts her knees in the sand, one grain at a time, aligning herself so the tide's next nudge won't hit the box directly. She angles her body as a breakwater. The call to 911 connects on the second ring. The operator's voice is composed, the kind of calm designed to pour water on sparks. She gives her name, the coordinates, the description. Metal munitions-style box, paper-wrapped sticks, white crystal residue, sweet chemical odor, frayed fuses, rising tide at a slow advance. She doesn't say dynamite. She says what she sees. The operator repeats it back, then adds the words that widen the circle. Stay absolutely still. Help is on the way. Do not, under any circumstances, try to move it. She asks to remain on the line. The operator agrees, voice steady enough to lean on. Meanwhile, instructions come in soft and clear. Mark off the area if possible, without touching the box. Keep others back. Note wind direction. She glances up the beach. No one. She whispers that she'll set a soft perimeter. The operator says, only if it doesn't change the box's conditions. She translates that into driftwood sticks, placed well outside the blast fantasy she can't stop calculating. She moves slow, measured, mindful of each grain of sand. One stick planted 20 paces out. Another on a line with the bluff stairs. She uses her own footprints as a warning ring. Each step is deliberate, as if the beach has turned into thin ice and the box is the dark water beneath. She returns to her original spot and resumes her posture. One hand hovering near the lid. Not touching, just ready to buffer a tremor. A gull lands too close. She hisses it away with a gentle wave of her wrist. No sudden flaps. The bird complains and lifts, its wing beats thumping air that doesn't reach the box. She logs wind is light on shore, the kind that carries siren threads before you see lights. The operator asks if there's visible liquid. She says no, only crystalline bloom, heavier at one seam. Dented. The operator says, that helps. Her mind runs a quiet reel through how dynamite ages. Sawdust or diatomaceous earth as absorbent in old sticks. Nitro weeping out when binders fail. Crystals forming like tiny razors that hate friction. No lifting, no tapping. No heroic shoving into deeper sand. She thinks of hands she'll never see. Workers cashing this load decades ago. Maybe planning to return after a job and then not returning. Wartime schedules, fuel rationing. A ledger line that never got its check mark. The tide keeps time. Each small reach forward is a reminder that this scene has a clock. She asks the operator if the bomb squad is local or state. State comes back. Fire is en route to secure access. Stay where you are. She says she will. She doesn't say that every instinct to retreat is arguing with the fact that her body, acting as a human brace, might be part of why nothing has shifted. She adjusts her breathing again. The box sits quiet, but the beach isn't. Eddies of sand crawl like tiny rivers. She cups her palm in the air near the lid, feeling for microcurrents. The operator asks about people nearby. She says, "None yet," then adds, "But this cove fills fast on weekends." It's a fact, not a plea, and yet it feels like asking the world to hurry. A memory flashes. The childhood curator again, a hand hovering over glass. Motion control, he'd murmured, meaning his own restraint as much as the artifact's needs. She mirrors it now. She looks at the fuses, their cotton hairs haloed in the low light, and refuses to blink long. She thinks of the cottages, the dogs, the kites that shadow the sand. A place is a promise, she reminds herself. The caretaking you do when no one's watching defines it. Sirens arrive as a feeling before a sound. Pressure changing in the air, then a far thread winding closer. She doesn't turn her head. The operator's tone shifts almost imperceptibly, the way voices do when help is real and not theoretical. "They're almost with you," she says. The world is still small. The seam, the crystals, the shallow cradle of sand. Her job is to keep it small until someone with different tools makes it larger and safer. She whispers one last instruction to herself, the simplest one. Stay. And she does. While she waits, the mind does what it's trained to do. Sift. The cove looks simple, but its past is layered like sediment. What nobody knew in this moment was how many stories were stacked under her knees. She'd read them in brittle minutes and faded maps, in handwritten notes that smelled of mildew and salt. Stakes aren't just the cottages above her. They're the gaps in memory that turn into accidents. Decades of construction records along this coast went missing when an office moved, then flooded. A county clerk retired. Boxes got rerouted. Names slipped. Storms moved sandbars and retired pilings. Landmarks blurred. Without a paper trail, hazards don't go away. They wait. She recalls a series of oral histories recorded with fishermen who drank coffee at dawn and spoke in halves. A pier built in the 40s to ship crushed stone. A demolition in the 50s when sections were blasted out rather than dismantled. Barges shuttling materials from a quarry upriver when fuel rationing made trucking expensive. Shipments marked delayed, split, paired. Words that made sense then but hide their meaning now. Details assemble like a quiet parade. Wartime coastal projects that grabbed whatever was available. Civilian blasting caps issued with minimal training. Municipal crews working under deadlines. Contractors subcontracting to crews that existed for a summer and vanished. Somewhere in those files, she remembers, was a memo noting a paired load cached overnight due to weather. The next day's ledger never showed it signed back in. There was one problem that nagged her when she read that gap months ago. No follow-up, no reconciliation, just a silence where a receipt should be. No one wrote "lost" because no one wanted that word near explosives. They moved on. Budgets close, projects finish, and the ocean keeps the rest. From that perspective, the box under her hand isn't random. It's a leftover from a job site that outlived its paperwork. A cache buried with good intentions. Return when the weather clears. And then forgotten when crews changed and stories didn't pass cleanly from one winter to the next. The storm last night peeled back enough sand to invite it back into the world. Meanwhile, life is about to collide with memory. Cottages are scheduled to reopen this weekend after repairs. The Kite Festival's banners were hung along the boardwalk yesterday, bright triangles promising wind play right here, on this same strand. Vendors will stake tents, children will run, dogs will drag leashes, and noses will find new scents. Those threads were already in motion, oblivious to the residue blooming inside a metal seam. She feels the weight of that intersection. It's one thing to find a relic. It's another to know exactly how many people could walk into its circle by accident. She presses the thought down, not to ignore it, but to hold it still. Panic doesn't help. Precision does. What nobody knew at the time, what the town would learn later, was how many small decisions had lined up to make this moment possible. A nor'easter that reshaped the dune. A maintenance delay at the archival annex that sent her to a different stack, where she found the memo about the paired load. A conversation with a retired crane operator who described crews caching dynamite in boxes painted a specific dull green. He'd laughed at the color then, called it army envy, but his throwaway phrase fixed the image in her mind. She studies the box again. Rivets in a pattern consistent with field crates of the era. The paint's ghost, military leaning. The dent on the left seam where crystals formed heavier. It all links. None of it is proof alone. Together, it's enough to steer her next words. The operator asks her to stay talking. So she does. Voice quiet, breath even, and adds context in small pieces that matter operationally. Old construction site likely. Pier work and quarry shipments. Records for this cove are incomplete. There might be more than one cache. The line is silent for half a heartbeat. Then the operator says she'll relay that to the bomb technicians. She thinks of the ledger gap again. That empty square where a signature never landed. The absence taught her something. Paper trails don't just show what happened. They reveal the shadows of what didn't. A missing mark can be a map. Today, it might be a warning. Across town, people are pouring coffee, pulling kites from closets, checking weather apps. Unknown to them, across this small beach, a woman kneels in the gray light, holding still, so history won't move the wrong way. The ocean keeps its rhythm. Sirens thread closer. The past presses against the present through a weeping seam, and she understands the next decision pulls in people who step toward danger for a living. Stakes crystallize fast. Unstable nitro in summer air. Crystals like tiny teeth along paper seams. A tide that won't negotiate. Heat, shock, friction. Anyone could end a neighborhood. She keeps the world small. The operator stays on the line, voice a steady metronome. Units are on approach. Keep still. She answers with details that matter, not guesses. Crystalline bloom heavier on the dented seam. No visible liquid. Wind light on shore. Tide rising inch by inch. The action begins long before flashing lights appear. She builds a soft perimeter, the kind that says, "Not today," without a shout. Driftwood planted far back, footprints marking an arc. Phone brightness dim, so a glare won't startle her hands. Then a dog walker crests the stairs, leash slack, curiosity already lifting the pace. She raises a palm, small and human, and speaks low. "Hazard, please take the upper path." The words land. The dog's nose huffs disappointment. The pair detour. 1 life. 2. Glide around the circle. Meanwhile, across town, volunteer pagers chirp in kitchens. A captain grabs keys, cuts the access road with cones and a hand-lettered sign. According to the operator, the Coast Guard has been notified. A water exclusion forming like an invisible fence just offshore. The beach narrows to essentials: silence, breath, and the waiting geometry of risk. Micro-story. Her hands begin to tremble, not big, not visible to anyone but her. She steadies them with the liturgy of her work. Provenance, condition, handling notes, she whispers, the way she does over fragile ledger paper. She recites the cataloging steps under her breath, and the tremor fades to a manageable hum. The box seems to hear none of it. It sits like a held breath in the sand. Action gathers pace. Gravel crunches at the bluff lot. The first engine noses in without siren, only the thrum of a careful idle. Firefighters step down, voices pitched low, posture tuned to quiet. They don't approach the box, they approach her perimeter. Eyes moving, taking in wind, bluff, tide, cottages. One kneels at the top of the stairs and lifts a hand, asking permission with a look. She tips her chin toward a safe approach line, and he nods. Radio whispering at his shoulder. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Hayes. Stay exactly as you are. The state bomb squad is 5 minutes out," he says, measured, grateful without saying the word. She relays what she told dispatch, then adds the memory about incomplete records and the possibility of a second cache. His gaze sharpens with that new gravity. "We'll widen the footprint," he says, and points crews to start a gentle sweep far back with eyes only. No metal tools near sand. Impact lands in the waiting. Minutes stretch into thin wire. The Kite Festival banners flutter somewhere beyond sightlines, carefree color against quiet hardware. A gull tries the perimeter again. A firefighter becomes a scarecrow with a soft hand wave. The tide tests the edge of the shallow cradle. Each push a reminder that patience has a clock. Then the convoy arrives without drama. Unmarked truck, a trailer, a second vehicle with gear. The techs step out in muted tones, not the bulky suits from movies, but soft, layered clothing, minimal weight, every movement designed to whisper. One carries a small case, another has sandbags already cradled like sleepy children. They move with a choreography that says they've done this in fields and basements and riverbanks, where time and weather were also part of the team. A technician crouches a body length from her and speaks just above the wind. "You did exactly right. Don't move yet. We'll take your place." The gratitude is real, practical. He slides a low foam block into the sand, inching it with 2 fingers until it kisses the box's side opposite her bracing hand. Another tech sweeps the sand gently with a gloved palm, creating a shallow trench where a sandbag can settle without shifting weight. They build a hush around the box. Sandbags become a berm, low and hugging, designed to cradle, not cage. Every placement is a breath, a pause, another breath. Primary assessment whispers among them. Crystallization confirmed. Paper compromised. Fuses intact but frayed. The dented seam draws an extra look and a murmured plan. No lifting, no tilting, no heroics. The water disruptor comes out. A compact cylinder, the opposite of flashy. They explain as they work, so she understands the story as it unfolds. We're going to detach any cap remotely, then we'll stabilize the rest, the lead tech says. He thanks her again for not trying to bury it deeper or haul it to a bin. Her eyes burn, and she blinks once, a controlled, careful blink, and then slides back on her knees as they take her place. They thread a remote line over sand, smoothed to a velvet path. No snags, no pebbles. Everyone moves back, voice volume dropping with distance. The ocean, steady, becomes the metronome again. Ready on pop, the tech calls, and the smallest punctuation sounds, more a cough than a crack. Then silence. Heads tilt. The team waits, lets the quiet settle, listens for the nothing they want to hear. The lead tech's shoulders ease a fraction. Caps detached. Impact ripples outward immediately. The captain on the stairs radios to widen the hold on the access road. A firefighter checks a cottage porch where someone had paused with a coffee mug, gently steering them inside. The operator in her ear says, "You're doing great, stay with me," even as she hears typing soft as rain. The techs flow back in, wick nitro with absorbent pads like white moths, lay cold packs to neutralize, and trade tools hand to hand like passing a secret. She steps behind the dune as asked, kneeling by the grass line, where she can see outlines but not details. Her job is done, which aches and relieves at once. A firefighter offers a canteen and she shakes her head, not ready to uncurl her focus. The Kite Festival coordinator's number flashes in her thoughts like a gull wing. She files it. There will be decisions later. When they crouched beside her, everything slowed even more. She thinks, and feels the truth of it. Professionals turned fear into steps, and steps into a path out. And yet one detail she'd marked earlier, the ledger's paired load, tugs at her sleeve, already changing what comes next. Any vibration could turn the crystals into teeth. That's the frame everyone works inside. The techs confer in short phrases, a language of nods and hand signals, then start building a hush around the box. No armored suits here, soft layers, low profile, boots that press rather than stomp. The tide presses its own schedule. The cottages sit within a circle they've already sketched in their heads, a radius that includes porches, windows, an old swing creaking on a beam. They assemble sandbags the way you tuck in a sleeping child. A berm rises, low and close, meant to absorb a surprise without sending it outward. One technician, gray at the temples, mouths wind and holds up 2 fingers, light on shore. Another answers with the angle they'll use for the water disruptor. Shallow, precise, just enough to interrupt a cap if one's tucked among the sticks. They don't say the word detonate. They say separate. Primary assessment becomes touch without touching. A gloved hand hovers a hair above the dented seam, tracking the thicker bloom of crystals, then retreats. Confirm crystallization, no visible pooling, the lead murmurs, and a scribe behind the dune repeats it into a log. They build a cradle right where the box lies, thin cedar strips slid under the edges by feel, not lift, so nothing scrapes metal against metal. The world narrows to pressure, angle, breath. The water disruptor looks plain, a compact cylinder with a job too technical for drama. They bed it into sand, smoothed to velvet, then sight along a line drawn in minds and fingers. A remote line snakes back along a path groomed like a garden row. No pebbles, no shell shards, nothing to snag or jolt. Everyone steps away in the same careful tempo, like dancers who've practiced leaving without making the air move. A tech kneels beside her before she slides fully behind the dune. His voice is low. "Thank you for not moving it." He doesn't linger on the heroism. He names the choice. She nods. Her eyes shine, and then steady. She yields her sightline to them and becomes part of the quiet. "Pop!" The call comes, and the smallest sound answers. A cough swallowed by wind. Silence stretches thin, then relaxes. Cap separated. Radios tick. The captain on the stairs signals to keep the road sealed, but his shoulders loosen a notch. The team returns, gloves whispering. Absorbent pads arrive like moths settling, white against the red-brown sticks. The pads drink what the crystals might feed, and cold packs follow, nested like river stones along the box's flanks to coax the nitro back into a calmer state. They talk in verbs that don't spike the pulse. Wick, cool, stabilize. A tech with steady hands slides a narrow wick under a seam with the patience of threading a needle in dusk. Another refreshes cold packs as they trade temperature for time. Condensation purls on plastic. Sand darkens in ovals where cold breathes into it. The tide tests the berm. A firefighter marks each reach with a fingertip on his pant leg. 1, 2, 3. So the commander has a clock without looking at water. The bomb techs adjust their plan to fit that metronome. No lifting, no tilt. The cradle they built becomes the final resting frame, while they treat the contents in place, pulling energy out of the system grain by grain. A second, softer pop cuts the air. Another micro-disruption at a fuse stub that looked like nothing until it mattered. Then, more quiet. The lead tech's gloved knuckles touch the berm once, a small signal that says, "Hold the line, we're okay." The firefighter offers her water again. This time she takes a sip and tastes metal, salt, a hint of plastic from the canteen. It brings her back to her ribs. She breathes. Across the dune, a porch door opens, then closes with a whispered reminder from a firefighter who never raises his voice. The world that almost changed keeps its shape for another minute, and then another. The team trades roles, fresh eyes, fresh hands. A tech unfurls a thin thermal blanket, tucks it over the berm and box like shade, shaving a few degrees from sun on metal. Little things matter when chemistry is listening. They talk briefly about removal and then decide against it. "Render safe in situ," the lead says. In place. The phrase carries relief and burden. It means nobody will haul a trembling secret through town. It also means the beach becomes a clinic until the contents are no longer a question. Pads come out saturated and go into a waiting bath within a sealed tray, never bumping, never brushing. Someone logs manufacturer mark stamped faint on an inner wrap. Evidence for later, relevance for now. The kite festival hangs in a different light now. The captain radios to hold decisions until they finish their second pass. Caution isn't fear, it's respect. She feels that distinction settle into her. Knowledge is a key that turns only as far as the lock allows. They pause, listen again. Even the gulls seem to understand the register of this work. The ocean's small slaps against sand become the room tone. Then the lead tech looks toward her. "We're going to call this stabilized," he says, careful with the word, generous with the look that follows. "We'll maintain a cooling cycle, keep the berm. Stand by through the next tide." She nods back, a yes that includes gratitude, exhaustion, and a thread of unfinished thought tugging at her sleeve. The ledger gap. The phrase paired load. She waits for a beat where breath returns, and then steps forward just enough to be heard without pushing air. "There might be a second cache," she says, quiet as the work, and the entire choreography tilts, still careful, still slow, but now with a new heading. The phrase "paired load" shifts the beach's gravity. The lead tech glances at the captain, then back to her. "Tell me what you remember." She keeps it tight. A 195's memo noting 2 identical crates staged overnight during pier work. Weather delay. Retrieval never logged. Same dull green paint described by a retired operator. Same idea. Cache and return. Only the return never happened. The lead nods once. We widen. Action snaps into a quiet plan. They expand the safe footprint without stirring sand near the first berm. Metal detection comes with tools chosen for gentleness. Coil wands on low sensitivity. Long fiberglass probes that slide rather than jab. The team sketches a grid with string and small flags pressed into distant, compacted sand, well outside the risk zone. She points to where the storm scoured deepest, reading the dune's fresh scars like handwriting. If a second box moved, it'd settle where the current slackened, she says, tracing a lazy arc along a lower swale. Meanwhile, tide charts come out. Laminated pages clipped to a board. Yesterday's surge annotated in pencil. The captain overlays that knowledge on wind and wave. Last night's push from the northeast, today's gentler return. A drift line where heavy objects might have rolled and then nested. They assign 2 techs to the hypothesized path and another pair to the lee side of a small berm where wrack piled higher than elsewhere. The coil hums. Sand whispers under careful feet. A faint ping, then nothing. The tech adjusts angle, dials the sensitivity up half a notch, sweeps again. Ping. Not exuberant, not film loud, just a shy note from below. He kneels, signals. Probes come forward, touched to the surface like testing pond ice. The fiberglass rod slides down through moist layers, pauses, taps something with a tone different from stone. He marks the spot and withdraws slow. Possible contact, he says, and the world tightens again. Stakes rise with the water table. This patch sits lower, closer to saturation. Waterlogged emulsion changes how old dynamite behaves. The lead tech recalibrates out loud, for the log and for the team. Softer sand, colder core, increased sensitivity to shock when drained. They adjust posture accordingly. No trenching that might undermine edges. No suction that could drag. Sandbags arrive ahead of tools to build a hush perimeter before anyone breathes closer. Microstory unfolds at the edge. A family appears at the top of the stairs. 2 adults, a child in a bright jacket clutching a kite like a promise. She steps to the safe line and raises a hand, gentler than before. "We're doing safety work," she says, voice low, friendly, firm. "Please use the bluff path today." The child peeks around a hip and asks, "Is the beach sick?" She crouches to shorten the distance. "It just needs rest," she says. The child nods, satisfied with the idea that places, like people, sometimes nap to get better. They turn away, kite bright against the gray. Back at the mark, the team repeats the liturgy with changes tailored to water. They smooth a landing for their gear, then bed the water disruptor at a shallower angle, accounting for saturation. A thin trench for the remote line is traced with fingers only, no tools. The first berm holds the original scene. The second berm rises like a sibling a dozen yards away, lower, careful, meant to catch what nobody wants to release. The Coast Guard widens the water exclusion. A boat idles farther off, bow pointed outward, as if ready to take a breath for the whole town. The pop is softer this time, swallowed by damp sand. Heads tilt, listening for echoes that don't come. Separation likely, the lead says, choosing the word likely because water dulls both sound and certainty. They wait, then approach in pairs, trading observation out loud. The probe confirms the edge of a second box, deeper, colder. No lift, no tilt. They wick where they can reach, using longer absorbent strips that drink without disturbing. Cold packs nestle into a shallow, hand-pressed cradle along the accessible seam. The rest will be a patient hour, not a dramatic minute. She watches the rhythm settle. Wick, cool, log. Refresh, pause, listen. A firefighter adjusts the access road signage to keep curiosity from curdling into risk. The captain radios the festival coordinator. Hold all setup, decision pending. No panic, just a redirect. Hope can wait its turn. The child's question lingers in her ear. Rest. Impact arrives as quiet relief. We're calling the second stabilized, the lead says. Again careful. Again clear. The beach breathes. The two berms stand like low altars to restraint. The captain lowers his chin once, a private thanks to the tide for giving them time. She steps closer to the command post and the lead tech meets her there. Your note about the paired load mattered, he says. It changed our search pattern. She doesn't claim it. She files it. They begin the after work while still on the sand. Logging manufacturer marks if they can be read without disturbance. Photographing rivet patterns for later cross-reference. Noting the exact distances between the caches against a temporary stake line. The Coast Guard shrinks the exclusion in stages. Fire relaxes the roadblock to local only. A gull lands on the far side of the cove and finds nothing to scavenge. It moves on. The near miss becomes a record instead of a headline. The beach, for now, is controlled. She looks at the ledger gap as if it were a person finally accounted for. Memory and method, those two old allies, had steered them to the second box before chance or play did. The tide turns, and meaning begins to rise with the waterline. In the quiet that follows the last siren, work changes shape. The beach is a ledger now, and she helps turn moments into entries. Gloves on, voice low. She reads what the boxes will give without being touched. Faint manufacturer stamps on inner wraps glimpsed through safe openings. Rivet patterns photographed for cross-reference. Paint ghosts recorded in the log. Lot numbers, if legible, become coordinates in a wider map. Each note says, "This happened, here, this way." Accountability has stakes. Hazards don't end when the tide turns. They end when the story is complete enough to prevent the next near miss. She sits with the incident commander and the lead tech at a folding table staked into firm sand. They build a chain of provenance. Who found, who observed, who stabilized, who recorded, so that no step dissolves into memory. Her field notes join the official file, timestamps intact, coordinates precise, odor described without guesswork. The record stands where fear had stood. A local historian arrives, wind-chapped and curious in the careful way. He brings copies of pier photographs and a demolition notice clipped from a brittle newspaper. Together, they draw a timeline. Wartime expansion, post-war dismantling. Quarry shipments routed by barge. The week of storms that delayed retrieval. then the ledger gap that swallowed responsibility. Contractor records are incomplete, but the fragments point true. A municipal seal appears on one memo, a reminder that regulations were different then and memory looser. The community gathers that evening in the town hall, room smelling of coffee and wet coats. She stands to the side while officials speak plainly. The guidance is simple and human. If you find a metal box, a cylinder, an unfamiliar device, don't touch, don't move, note location, call. No shame in caution. A firefighter holds up examples of everyday beach debris versus objects that warrant a call, then sets them down with a soft smile. People nod. You can feel worry soften into preparedness. Human threads pull close. The lead bomb technician finds her near the door and presses a small coin into her palm. His unit's challenge coin, edges worn by other hands. He doesn't make a speech. For restraint, he says. She closes her fingers around the weight, surprised by the way gratitude can be shaped in metal. They stand in companionable quiet for a breath, then step back into their separate roles. Impact begins to ripple. Coastal hazard maps get updated. The cove earns a quiet asterisk that signals care, not fear. Signage is revised, clearer language, fewer words, bigger icons, so that a morning walker doesn't have to be a historian to make a good choice. An archive grant gets redirected to scan legacy permits and contractor logs. Brittle pages will become searchable lines, and missing signatures will be easier to spot. The town's website adds a one-page guide. What to do, what not to touch, who to call, written in the voice she wished she'd had when the smell turned sweet. In the aftermath, meaning doesn't shout. It accumulates. The beach looks the same, but its story is cleaner. People learn a new reflex. Pause, observe, report. Quiet bravery gets a name and a map. And the work, hers, theirs, moves from crisis to record, where it can keep watch without waking anyone at night. In the days after, she moves through her home like someone rearranging shelves after an earthquake. Nothing broke, but everything shifted. The ledger that once held only tides and wind now carries a new column. Caution. Not fear. She refuses that word, but a respectful pause that wasn't there before. She goes back to the cove at dawn when the light is thin and forgiving. The air is cool enough to sharpen thought. Her ritual walks resume, but the steps include additions. Distance first. She scans from the dune before she descends, tracing patterns, noting what the storm traded overnight. Then tools, gloves tucked into her pocket, a whistle on a lanyard resting against her collarbone, a phone with emergency numbers pinned to the top of her favorites, and a plan. If she sees something that doesn't fit the beach's grammar, she won't touch, won't test, won't lean in. She'll observe, mark, call. The first morning back, the cove looks ordinary in a way that feels like mercy. She walks her familiar line, dune grass to rack to waterline, and her pulse finds the old rhythm. The ocean is a teacher that way. It gives you the same lesson until you know it by heart. When she reaches the place where the berm once stood, the sand is smooth as if the beach has pulled a blanket over a sleeping child. She stops anyway, acknowledges the quiet, and lets a breath go. Gratitude can be as simple as that. The thing is, living with a near disaster doesn't mean living smaller. It means living slower in the right moments. She tests that idea with a simple, harmless find, a small brass tag half buried where the tide has combed fine lines. She kneels and slides her gloved fingers around it, easing it free without force. It's stamped with a number and a single letter, its hole worn oval from years on a nail or a chain. No sweet odor, no residue, no wrongness in the air. She smiles, small, private, and makes a note. The world still offers puzzles. Not all doors are wired. She sits on the lowest step of the bluff stairs, sunlight just warming the wood, and writes. Her ledger entry reads like a conversation with both the beach and herself. Wind, light north. Rack, sparse. Brass tag, harmless. Catalogued. Then, a new section. Guidance in plain language, the way she wishes all instructions were given. If you walk our coast, carry a phone. If you see a metal box, cylinder, or any device that doesn't belong, don't touch. Note the location with a landmark or a pin. Step back. Call. Wait where you're safe. No shame in caution. Over the next week, that note becomes a one-page guide. She strips out jargon and trades it for clarity. One simple analogy anchors the message. Knowledge is a key. It can open doors, but only if you turn it slowly. She lists what to do and what not to do. She adds who to call, a simple sequence, not a maze. She runs it past the fire captain and the bomb tech, and they nod, suggesting a single phrase here, a bigger font there. The library prints stacks. Coffee shops set them beside napkin dispensers. The town posts it online. Her own work deepens in quiet ways you can't photograph. She starts a cross-reference project for the archive, scanning old permits and contractor logs into a searchable map, so that ledger gaps turn into flags rather than disappear. When she finds a missing signature, she marks it with a note. Absence may matter. She highlights the weeks when storms halted work, and patterns that hinted at caches staged for return. It's not glamorous. It's careful, and it makes the future sturdier. She keeps walking the cove, and the cove keeps meeting her halfway. A micro-story finds her on a Tuesday. A boy in rain boots stands at the top of the stairs with a kite under his arm, the same color as the one she turned away. He spots her and asks, "Is the beach still resting?" She says, "It's waking up." He nods solemnly and follows his parent along the bluff path. She watches them go with a quiet ease she didn't expect to feel so soon. Not every morning brings meaning. Some bring only fog and a gull arguing with its reflection. That's fine. The ledger holds those days too. The point is to keep showing up with attention. To let curiosity lead but not drag. To remember that care is its own kind of courage, especially when no one is watching. One afternoon, she runs her fingers over the coin the bomb tech placed in her palm. Its weight is modest, but it represents a moment of grace that changed her. It reminds her that restraint is an action, not the absence of one. She tucks it into the ledger's inside pocket, where it lands with the same soft thud as a truth you're finally ready to carry. When the Kite Festival reschedules, she stands on the bluff and watches the sky become bright with color. The beach is loud again, alive. Kites carving letters you can't read, but understand anyway. She sees the invisible circles the team drew, the places where sand remembers a hush, and feels gratitude for the people who step toward danger with quiet hands. She feels something else too, a steadier version of herself, curiosity tempered, not dimmed. As the day fades, she walks one last line along the water's edge. The tide writes its U's and V's and erases them again. She chooses a small shell with a hole at the top, a harmless charm, and threads it onto her whistle's lanyard. A reminder: listen first, move second. Let knowledge open doors and turn the key slowly. One calm choice turned a quiet beach into a safer place, and a small town learned how care can outlast fear. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who walks the shore. We tell human stories like this every week. Subscribe and watch next to see how responders train for moments that ask for steady hands.